Welcome into a June 24th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We are streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, and as always, looking for your inbox questions. We are also a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank Seravalli, are we going to make it 2 straight shows where you break a trade live on the air?
I hope not, because that was not that fun for me yesterday. Not going to lie.
That was hectic, but we loved every second of it. Trevor Zegras going to the Philadelphia Flyers in the middle of our show. We're going to be joined by Anthony DiMarco from Daily Faceoff. He's going to give us the Flyers side of things in our big segment and talk about what else they're going to do. But first, Frank, let's kick off our show by going maybe a little bit more in depth on the Anaheim Ducks and Pat Verbeek's plan as GM of the team. And listen, I don't think a team that all we've heard is they're itching to take the next step forward. They hire Quenneville. They take on the Chris Kreider deal. They now move on from Zegras. They have $36 million in cap space. Like, you don't do all of that if there's not another shoe to drop, right?
No, I think this is one step as the Ducks continue to grow. It may come in fits and starts. They've tried to be aggressive before. Last year, think about it, they were one of the top teams that was after Steven Stamkos, for instance, and they were rebuffed. So doesn't mean that they're going to get everything on their wish list, but what it does signal is, and I thought Pat Verbeek's words were very interesting in saying that basically that Trevor Zegras didn't fit the build of this team anymore. Now, I think the Ducks are to blame for that, or they weren't necessarily using him or deploying him in the right way to the point where he essentially, was backed into a corner and quite clearly didn't really love the situation that he was in. They beat the love of the game out of him, in my view, but that's neither here nor there. The truth is that Pat Verbeek said that Trevor Zegras has eyes on being a center in the NHL, and that with where they were probably planning on using him, that he didn't make sense. So he said a cohesive plan is what, how he was able to explain all of this to Ducks owner Henry Samueli, as I'm sure there were questions. And they ended up selling low on a player that quite clearly has top 6 talent. So what does that mean? Obviously, their defense is in pretty good shape. They've got their goaltender of the future already in net in the present in Lucas Dostal. They've got some really good forwards, and now it's about continuing to add properly playing guys in the bottom 6 that are well suited to play there, and then continuing to supplant and support your top 6.
Yeah, and that top 6 has still a boatload of really quality young talent. Gauthier, Carlson, Mason McTavish. They have the pieces there. I was talking with the What Chaos guys, Pete and DJ, yesterday, and they floated out an idea of like, okay, if Mitch Marner's going to take his time potentially on a decision in free agency, and who knows if that'll happen, but if he does, is there going to be a team out there who just says, you know what? To hell with that idea. Let's just jump the market, get someone like Nick Ehlers and go, perfect. We got a guy, even if he maybe wasn't our number 1 target, we still think he makes us better. I'd be curious about Ehlers and the Ducks, because we've also heard that he maybe wants to go somewhere where there's a little bit less noise, where it's not a hotbed hockey market. Going to Anaheim, being a part of that young core, I could just imagine him going next to a Leo Carlson and that being a really nice duo for the Ducks.
I don't see it. I just think Pat Verbeek has a very specific model in place for his players. He wants grinders. He wants guys who compete to every last inch of the ice. He wants toughness. He wants an edge. All things that Trevor Zegras didn't have, in his view, a very one-dimensional player. So when Trevor Zegras moves on, I can't imagine you're going to then turn around and dole out a pile of money to Nikolai Ehlers. I just don't see it.
So is there a fit out there that you kind of see on the market for Pat Verbeek that does check a few more of those boxes?
I think it's probably on the trade front, to be honest. I mean, I could see Mitch Marner for sure. Like, I think that they'd really be interested in his compete level and the high-end nature of it. But I think there's a limit in terms of what they would want to spend.
Fair. They have an extra second round pick. They also have all of their first round picks for the next 3 years. So a little bit of draft capital kicking around if Verbeek does decide to go that route. Let's stick in the Pacific Division, Frank. It's our final offseason preview. We've basically ripped through all 32 teams in the NHL. And listen, we've touched on Vegas here and there, but they're getting to an interesting point. And yesterday on the DFO rundown, you talked about the possibility of like an Alex Peitrangelo LTIR stint. And when you look at their cap picture, 9.6 million, you kind of wince and be like, oh man, okay, you need to get Hag done. You got Riley Smith. Like, if you want to bring him back, like that 9.6 million to fill out the rest of your roster, it can disappear quick. And then you walk down the path of, well, hold up. What if there's 8.8 in LTIR space? All of a sudden you can keep Hag and you can bring back a Riley Smith, one of the original Golden Misfits. And then you could also still sign a high-end forward. And then you could also still probably do something else after that. Like, Peitrangelo to LTIR would drastically change the complexion of their summer.
It would, and I think it's something that a lot of people are wondering about behind the scenes. There hasn't been any sort of formal declaration from Vegas. I think his status has been a bit of a mystery. Remember, this is a player that bailed out of Four Nations Faceoff, he said, due to his body not cooperating and illness. Seemed like a pretty odd situation then. Then we got to the playoffs and he wasn't really quite at the normal Alex Peitrangelo level that a lot of people would hope, but they've gave no indication as to what that means for his future and for next season. And if everyone's looking for an off-ramp for Vegas, that's what they're seeing as a way to create more cap space easily. Now, there was some reporting out there on social media today that the Vegas Golden Knights were considering moving Tomas Hertl. I don't have any evidence that that's the case.
Yeah, and we did have a lot of people, obviously, in our chat wondering that Hertl still has, 5 more years on his deal, $6.75 million. And again, the path to the Golden Knights getting a Marner or whoever doesn't necessarily have to involve moving out that kind of salary. I even kind of raised an eyebrow earlier in the offseason, or while the playoffs were still going on, with all that William Karlsson smoke. And like, to me, you have a guy like that, 5.9 million, he's still giving them good years. Like, I don't really see that as like, let's subtract Karlsson so we can pay 9 or 10 or 11 for Marner. Like, that never really computed either.
No, and honestly, depending on the status of Peitrangelo moving forward, if he is healthy to play, wouldn't you consider moving out one of those other defensemen that are signed to long-term deals? Like, if you were to go out and sign Noah Hannafin to a deal today and it was 7 years at 7.35, don't you think he would get more on the open market?
Probably. And it's interesting to look at the way that blue line is structured with those 3 big horses in Peitrangelo, Theodore, and Hannafin. And you contrast that with the Florida Panthers blue line that just won. And it's the exact opposite. They do it by committee there. And I guess, like, again, it is a luxury to have 3 defensemen that good. But is it worth the $25 million they're spending on them? Or 24?
It's a lot. It becomes expensive in a hurry. And particularly when they get to the playoffs and all 3 of them at varying points seem to not live up to their billing, that results in a short run.
Yeah, absolutely. We know Kelly McCrimmon and company out in Vegas do not like to sit on their hands all that much. So we'll see. Expecting big things out of Vegas, expecting big things really in the Pacific Division in general, Frank. Like, I really do think there's a bunch of teams there who are probably itching to tinker with their rosters quite significantly. But let's go out east really quick. Some news coming down today about the New York Rangers and the decision they had to make with their draft pick. They have to send a draft pick to Pittsburgh to complete the JT Miller trade that they made with Vancouver, and you kind of got to do all the dot connecting there. But the point is, their option was they could send 12th overall this year to Pittsburgh, or they could say, we want to select 12th overall, but then next year's pick becomes unprotected. Is this just the Rangers taking the safer option and saying, hey, there's no world now where we accidentally give up like a top 5 or the number 1 overall pick? Or is this maybe a signal that the Rangers are going, ooh, maybe we're not going to be cup contenders next year?
No, I think this is the New York Rangers de-risking themselves. Like, to be fair, if you're going to give up the 12th overall pick, do it in a year in which the draft is somewhat mediocre, below average, I guess is a way that you could explain it without hurting Steven Ellis's feelings for all the work that he's poured into it. It's not a draft that everyone is clamoring to be in. There's multiple first round picks that are available right now today teams that are willing to move. And then there will be more of teams willing to move up and down based on how the draft board shakes out on Friday night. I expect it to be very active. So you're going to take that part of it and how you view 2025 and park that, and then also look at what is a very special class in 2026. So A, you're hoping that you bounce back, but B, you did not see your season this year going off the rails following a President's Trophy. So just in case that happens again, the last thing you want is to be handing the Pittsburgh Penguins an unprotected pick that could become Gavin McKenna, because, by the way, the Rangers have won draft lotteries before that with their pick. So the last thing you want to do is give that up. But here's the other part of it that not many other people have been talking about. With the Rangers hoping to be better next season, that also means now that you have a trade chip in 2026 to trade at the deadline or whenever else to make your team even better. So a bounce back candidate, likely playoff team, but then also now with something in their arsenal to trade, as opposed to getting all excited about picking 12 in a draft that everyone views as below average.
That angle of it is really interesting because, again, they got out of the Kreider deal. Obviously, we know last year they got out of the Trouba deal. They're sitting here with $12 million in cap space. And listen, a couple of RFAs and Miller and Jones and Will Cully to sign. But again, if they want to try to do something, they could. That's an interesting one. The flip side of this, of course, is Pittsburgh. And listen, I'm sure maybe there was a part of Kyle Dubas who was sitting there going, maybe I do want to have the risk and take the chance that the Rangers bottom out next year and I get a great draft pick. But also, I don't think the Pittsburgh Penguins are complaining about now picking 11th and 12th in this year's draft. It's an organization that's desperate to put some quality young players into its system. Back-to-back draft, like this is a pivotal draft for them. Even if you don't view it as all that strong, you need to nail these picks.
Yes, and I get that, but if I'm the Penguins, I wanted next year. I was rooting for chaos, and I'm saying, man, give me that unprotected pick. Let's turn it into a true lottery situation and root for a division rival to lose. And I'm going, yeah, it's great to pick 11th and 12th, but again, go back to my previous point, in a below average draft. So yes, they do need to stack these things up, and I get it, but you're also limiting the ceiling of the player you can pick based on the players that are available this year.
All right, Frank, let's play a little fill in the blank before we get to our friend Anthony DiMarco and talk some Philadelphia Flyers. First one I got for you are on the big three on the defensive market for free agency this year. Again, we are a week away from our free agent special here on Daily Faceoff Live. And Frank, Gavrikov, Provorov, Ekblad. Your fill in the blank is one team that you would say is the closest to being a lock to sign one of these big free agent defensemen would be who?
I don't play the lock game 1 week out from free agency. Nice try. I would say that a team like the Rangers is going to be very interested in Gavrikov. When it comes to Provorov, I'm still kind of shocked that the Blue Jackets haven't re-signed him yet, that he's potentially going to market. I would have thought for a guy that wanted to be there, that had played reasonably well, that they'd be ready and willing to commit to. Particularly because, think about their system. They also traded away a player last year in David Yaremchuk, and they've got Denton Mateychuk there and on the way. And Werenski's been great. But if you're the Blue Jackets, you need to stack as many quality defensemen as you can. And Provorov is a relatively young UFA. Make a commitment to him. I'm just surprised that it hasn't happened. So that part leaves me wondering what the market for him looks like. And I think everyone has spent a lot of time wondering about what Aaron Ekblad might look like in a Toronto Maple Leafs uniform.
That would be very interesting. And I'm going to ask you more about the Leafs and some Canadian teams in a second. I guess where I was kind of going with my question was okay, if you think the Rangers like Gavrikov, are they a team that if they were to miss on Gavrikov, just pivot and go we want to get one of them? What's an Ekblad deal look like? What's a Provorov deal look like? Or do you think it's, no, we just like Gavrikov. If we don't get that, powder dry?
I don't know about powder dry, but there's probably a different check down option because I think they're looking for a very specific style of defender, not defenseman, defender. and they have to do a better job of defending in front of Igor Shesterkin. It's great to have true talents like an Adam Fox, and Braden Schneider is such a big part of what they're doing moving forward. But you need guys that can defend, and they've got to add some more balance to their team from that perspective.
We got an Ask DFO in here about the Leafs having, potentially a bunch of money to spend if both Marner and Tavares were to leave. And yesterday I noted how many people were sending in Canadians mock trades. And we've talked Senators. We know the Oilers are busy. Vancouver's basically Vegas North in the sense they don't like sitting on their hands all that often. Which Canadian team's GM is going to have the most expensive phone bill this month? Who do you think is going to be the most active of the bunch, Frank?
Probably Brad Treliving, because he's usually in on everything anyway, but also because if there is no Tavares, if there is no Marner, you're going to have tons of space and you're going to have lots of reasons to be aggressive, and you've got some assets at the same time that you could move if you really wanted to. So I think the Leafs, I don't think the Sens are going to be big spenders. I think the Canadians want to be aggressive on the trade front, not in free agency. I think the Canucks have a ton of work to do, but seem to be spinning their wheels because they don't have a lot of assets to move to get them. The Jets are typically not a big free agent team. The Flames are more trading for players within their age scheme and moving out Rasmus Andersson likely. And then the Oilers are looking at goaltending one, and then potentially some younger speedy forwards. So it's probably still the Leafs.
Let's keep cruising along, Frank, and get to our big segment for the day. It's the All 32, and it's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. More than 85 locations across Canada through Charm and their sister brands. And you can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece Program. It all comes with their unbeatable pricing policy. To find out more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. Anthony DiMarco from Daily Faceoff joins us once again to dig into the Flyers side of that big trade yesterday. They acquired Trevor Zegras. And Anthony, let me just start with what made Zegras and the Flyers, what makes it a good fit in your eyes?
Well, it's a good fit because he's a top 6 player in terms of skill, and he was available. And I believe Dan Briere mentioned in his media availability last week alongside Brent Flair is that those players are so rarely available via trade. And look, there is an inherent risk that comes with Trevor Zegras, the injury history as of late, the lack of production with the Anaheim Ducks under former head coach Greg Cronin. This is not a slam dunk by any stretch that Zegras will be a centerman, let alone a top 6 talent. But if you're Danny Briere and the Philadelphia Flyers, given the package that they gave up, it is well worth that risk.
Do you think the Flyers are believers that Zegras can be a center?
I think they do believe that, Frank. And I think that for them, they kind of have to believe it because they have nobody else. Like, aside from him, you have Noah Cates, Sean Couturier. I think most people would agree that neither of those guys are top 6 centermen if you are a team with Stanley Cup aspirations, if not even just playoff aspirations. But I think for a team like the Flyers, you bring in a guy like Zegras, who I believe wants to play in the middle. I think Pat Verbeek alluded to that in his media availability yesterday. And you really hope that he can rekindle that magic that he had with the Anaheim Ducks going back a few seasons when he had back-to-back 60-point-plus campaigns. So I think they're believers in it. Hopefully they think that Rick Tocchet could pull something out of him, but it is anything but a guarantee that Zegras is that guy when all is said and done.
What do you see the Flyers getting up to? I know there was some spark on social media yesterday. Hey, this is just the first in a line of deals that the Flyers have or are targeting. In speaking to people close to the team yesterday, I don't get the sense that that's actually the case at this moment in time, that anything's front burner. Doesn't mean they won't try, but what else do you think is on their priority list?
Well, I think you alluded to it, Frank, that they are searching for a goaltender to pair with Sam Ersson going into next season. Like, obviously, the Ivan Fedotov / Alexei Kolosov experiment did not go well. I do think John Tortorella had a lot to do with that, being very volatile in the way he handled his goaltenders, but the Flyers are not prepared to take that risk going into this season. So who are some names that you look at? I think that they've checked in on Joel Hofer of the St. Louis Blues and Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks, but each of those goaltenders would garner a first-round pick going back the other way. I don't think the Flyers are in a position to pay up for that for either of those two guys. Then you look at some of the free agents. Jake Allen's a name who's arguably going to garner the most attention as a pending UFA. Ilya Samsonov is one that kind of jumps out to me. By all accounts, is heading to UFA. Is a Russian, and the Flyers always seem to have their ears to the ground to bring in as many Russians as possible, given Matvei Michkov being the crown jewel of this team. Then you look at guys like Anton Forsberg and Ville Husso. So I think a goaltender to pair with Sam Ersson going into next year is one of the guys, or one of the pieces they're going to look at. And I do think they'll keep an eye out for a left shot defenseman to maybe pair with Jamie Drysdale long term. Is that Bowen Byram? Probably not, given what he's going to be asking for on his next contract. Did they circle around Nick Hague? Is he even available? So I think a goaltender first and foremost, a defenseman, and it wouldn't shock me if they target a bottom line center, given them moving off from Ryan Poehling.
Yeah, just quickly, you talked about maybe not being in a position to give up a first-round pick for a goaltender, but Danny Briere obviously has those 3 first-rounders that people can see on their screen at his disposal. Is there a spot in their lineup, a scoring winger, a top 6 center? You mentioned the left shot D-man. Is there one of those spots that you think he would give up a first-round pick if he could fill one of those holes?
I think if you could get a top 6 centerman, that's a guy that's something that they would give it up for. Like, this is not a name that I think is out there, and Frank could speak to it better than me. But one name that was brought up to me in passing was Anton Lundell. If Sam Bennett does re-sign with the Florida Panthers at, let's say, $8.5-9 million per year, is Lundell available? That's the type of player that I think Danny Briere would be comfortable giving up a first-round pick for. And there'd probably be a bunch of teams that'd be comfortable giving up a first-round pick for. Now, I have no indication that he's even available. It was just speculated to me, like, if they re-sign Bennett and they have Barkov already at $10 million per year, does that make Lundell and his $5 million AAV expendable? So I think that would be the type of guy that Danny Briere would be comfortable giving up a first-round pick for.
All right, fill in the blank for us. Friday night, LA draft. The Flyers are making blank number of picks in round 1.
I'm going to say 3, just because I don't think the player is going to be available, the type of guy that they will give up a first-round pick for. Now, look, I think a Bowen Byram would theoretically be a guy that they would give up that pick for, but if he is actually asking for north of $8.35 million AAV, the Owen Power deal, I don't think the Flyers are in a position to do that at this time, especially with Cam York's contract still up in the air. And I think that there is some uncertainty as to what Bowen Byram could be. Now, with the skyrocketing salary cap over the next few seasons, $8.5 million, just for argument's sake, will be the going rate for what? A number 2, number 3 defenseman? But I just don't think the Flyers are in a position right now to give up a first-round pick for a guy who's going to ask that much. And I don't think there's going to be another player available between now and Friday night that would warrant giving up a first-round pick if you're the Flyers.
Fair enough. Danny Briere certainly has the power to do it. Got some money as well. Another interesting GM to keep an eye on. Anthony, you can read your work at dailyfaceoff.com. Appreciate you popping on.
Thanks a lot, boys. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Meet the first of its kind. The Ninja Crispy Portable Cooking System. The power of a full-sized air fryer in the palm of your hand. So you can cook big or small batches. Just prep it, crisp it, serve it, and store it all in one.
Brought to you by the Ninja Crispy 4-in-1 portable glass air fryer. It is thermal shock resistant and can go from frozen to crispy in just minutes. And with the Crispy Power Pod, you get the power of a full-sized air fryer in the palm of your hands. Prep, cook, and store anything from crispy favorites to one-dish meals. Visit their website in the link in our description or check out ninjakitchen.ca. We got a couple for you, Frank. A few of them are trade free agency related, but Sammy is our resident Blues fan, and she dropped in the first question of the day. Can you play Fashion Police? Tell us what you think of the St. Louis Blues rebrand.
I like it. I think it's the blue, the changing of the blue color, shade of blue is welcomed. And I think it's just like adds a little edge to it. And I love the little experiments that they've done over the years. I don't know if you saw that one helmet sticker that they had with the STL script. It kind of looked like a St. Louis Cardinals kind of thing, but a little bit different. And I just think it's a nice touch. And I like what the Bruins have done as well, going back to their more heritage style B that they're changing the spoked B to.
Yeah, I like it. I was looking, they put out a post with like the new hats they have in their shop. And you're right, that Cardinal style STL logo is so sweet. We got another one here from Mechanicsville who wants to know, what would you guess the price tag is for a guy like Jake Allen? I mean, the projections from AFP are the projections, but if he's truly kind of like the only bona fide 1A, 1B guy on the market, is there a chance some team blows it out of the water?
I could see him stretching into the 5 million AAV range. It would have to be relatively short term because he is 34, but he's already at 385 and his numbers were good and his playoff numbers have been good. 5 million with the cap going up is not a crazy number for a guy to play in 1B.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's part of that rewiring of our brains. It's no longer a flat cap world. Like, there's going to be a lot of teams who your goalie duo costs you $12+ million going forward. So if Allen's your 1A, 1B, then yeah, maybe that actually is pretty decent value, even if it's a 2-3 year deal.
Yeah. Maybe not 12, but I think like 9 might be the new normal. One guy at 5, one guy at 4, one guy at 6, one guy at 3. However you want to split it up, it's probably a lot closer to that because you talked about rewiring our brains. Think about it from this perspective. The players who have been squeezed in the flat cap era for 4 years were not the highest paid players in the league. They continued to get their bank. It was the middle class of guys, the guys that were somewhere between like $2 and $6 million. They were all squeezed down to like 3. And so now that's going to slowly creep back up again. And that middle class NHL player, not the $1 to $2 million guys, not the league min guys, but the guys that are in that middle world, they're all going to get paid more moving forward.
Yeah, that's fair. Randy also says, how much do you think Vladar gets? I mean, he might be the second best option on the market, which, like, you can tell I'm wincing saying that.
Probably 3. He was at 2.2. I think he's right in that probably 3 times 3 range. Might even be a little more. He's also still young. He's really relatively young by goalie standards, and teams love to pay for big goalies.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Some people might just look and be like, 6'5", hell yeah, we're in. And listen, he didn't have an amazing season last year, but it's not like his numbers, I wouldn't call them putrid by any stretch. He was just a hair under a .900 save percentage with the Flames in 29 starts.
He also took on all the hard starts in the beginning of the year to let Dustin Wolf wade into it. He had the toughest matchups, and so I think that probably skews his numbers a little bit.
Fair. Let's keep moving to our daily bets for today, brought to you by Bet365. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 19 years or older. Frank, you said you don't do locks, and that's at this time of year. But they already have a lineup for Trevor Zegras' points next season, and the line is set at 48.5. I think this is a great spot. Obviously, it's dependent on him staying healthy, but if he's going to play a bigger role in Philly, like, he was on pace to do this last year if he stayed healthy. I think he's a 50-point guy every day of the week.
I would be hammering the over on this. This is a poor line, and go back to speaking of locks, one of my stone cold mortal locks of the year in my 32 bold predictions was Matvei Michkov over 49, and he crushed it. So get in while the getting's good.
Before we get to garbage time, hand up. Sam, our Blues fan in the chat, not a woman, it's a man. I don't know why I said that. I shouldn't have assumed anything. That is a name that could go either way. So that is me apologizing to Sam in the chat. Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. Frank, for the first time in over 100 years, a professional hockey team in Vancouver has won a title. The Abbotsford Canucks finished off their Calder Cup run last night. Again, our crew at Canucks Army, Jason Patterson, David Quadrelli, they did a bang-up job covering this run as well. Also, look at Phil DiGiuseppe in the background. a little Florida Panthers-esque flipping off the crowd in Charlotte. But the Abbotsford Canucks win the Calder Cup. It was a great series that goes the distance as well. And the MVP of this run was Arthur Silovs, and his numbers were absolutely jaw-dropping, Frank. He was unbelievable in these playoffs, and it kind of brings up a question like Thatcher Demko's on your trade targets board. Should the Canucks not be believing this guy and believing in this guy going to a tandem with him and Lankinen next year?
I wrote it in my goalie market story yesterday. Look, here's the deal. The Artie party, everyone was super excited after he filled in for Demko and Casey DeSmith when they went down in the playoffs. And he did an admirable job going up against the Edmonton Oilers. And people were thinking that he would just parlay that into the season. You go Lankinen and Silovs while Demko's out to start. And they lost trust in him really quickly to the point where, like, it was abundantly obvious that he couldn't do the job. This should inspire a lot of confidence. Look, development is not linear, and these are impeccable numbers that he should be a guy that is playing in the NHL at that level at some point next season. So I personally think that it makes a ton of sense for, like, why would you head into this season if you're not extending Thatcher Demko with him as a pending UFA? Like, goalies never get traded. You're going to just let him walk for nothing. Asking a first-round pick for Thatcher Demko, even now with his health status, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. They should change the ask and go with Lankinen and Silovs. That's just my view, especially for a team that might not have super high expectations next year if they can't fill some of their other spots, like that 2C role that they're desperately trying to fill. So I think the Canucks have lots of questions to answer, but in goal with three pretty solid goalies, that's not one of them.
Yeah, and like, again, to your point, move out the $5 million from Demko. All of a sudden, you bring up Silovs. You still have $17 million in cap space. Your roster is relatively full. Like, you can start to chart a path to adding an impact forward if you free up that money. Well said by you. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show.
I was just going to say congratulations to the Abbotsford Canucks, the 9th Canadian-based team to win the American Hockey League title.
Oh, wow. That is an interesting fact as well. Hall of Fame announcement. We'll have that covered today at dailyfaceoff.com. Our boy Paul Paduti on Twitter is already putting out a whole bunch of insight and analysis into that as well. And then tomorrow, all new trade targets board right here on the show. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody. We'll see you back right here tomorrow at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.